Welcome to Engineering Influence, a podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies. We're coming to you live from our 2024 annual Spring Convention and Legislative Summit here in Washington, D.C. And I'm very pleased today to be joined by the focal point that kicks off the entire event. We're very, very pleased and honored to be joined by Miguel Cervantes. He is a Broadway performer. He was handpicked by Lin-Manuel Miranda to play the role of Alexander Hamilton in Hamilton. And he also has a very, very impressive and thought-provoking story to tell, additionally, a very personal story. And he's going to be sharing those two things with us on stage tonight. Miguel, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So, it's an engineering crowd. It's a little bit different. I mean, than your normal paying Broadway or
Sure.
off-Broadway performance. Have you done a lot of these events where it's kind of more like corporate or the non conference kind of set?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to be in venues like this or in situations like this where it's not they're not paying money to go see Hamilton.
Yeah.
There's a kind of separation is the wrong word, but there is when I'm in the show on Broadway, I put on the clothes, put on the hair, the microphone, and it's my real hair though. I said put on the hair. Back in
You're
the
lucky. That's
but and I tell the story, and the story never changes. The story is the story. It's the song. We say the same words. The energy in the room can sort of be a little bit different based on if people are laughing a lot or really engaging in the show. But the actual beginning and end, it all happens the same way.
Yeah.
In places like this and sort of events like this, there is much less of a regimented journey, and it's more of a conversation between me and the audience. And I am not Alexander Hamilton. I am Miguel. And I get to talk about my life and pull the curtain back a little bit and say, talk about while Hamilton, the job and the Broadway performance and the Broadway production is a sexy way to make money, and it's very cool. There is another story there. There's another life there. There's another, and to be able to share that part of my life that's not just the on stage persona is exciting to me. And so I whether they're engineers or corporate folks or money folks or whatever sort of lifestyle they are, the human element of who we all are behind the clothes we wear is sort of what I like to talk about.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because with the human element tends to get you talk about big picture things, you talk about business and all that. We try to bring it back to the human element because at the end of the day, a lot of the things our people do, engineers, they're designing things that affect yourself, your individual daily actions, getting to work, driving, taking the train, whatever, and it is a humanization of what is otherwise a stark kind of cold environment around you.
I mean,
right?
I think there is I always like to talk about I have this whole other life.
Yeah.
From 7 a.m. when I wake up until 7 p.m. when I go on stage.
Yeah.
And then at 11:30 after the show, I have this other whole life that I have to do. And in that same moment, you see the show. Yeah. Much like you see the roads, you see the buildings or whatever. Sort of. It's a good comparison. And there's a whole. There's the journey I got to get there. There's the journey I have to go through from one day to the next to get myself ready to do the show every day. Yeah. So there's always a parallel between those kinds of things, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that people, it always amazes me when you have live performances of the fact that you're doing that so many times, a week, that you have to prepare yourself each and every time, even though you've done it 100 times. Every time is unique because your audience is unique. I mean, is there ever a time where a performance becomes rote in your mind? You're just okay, I'm just going through, or is it always a new?
Never. Every time it's as fresh and exciting as the first time. That's a lie. That's my job.
Yeah.
My job is to make sure that my performance feels that way. Yeah. It does not. It's not actually that way. I did the show for 8 years. Little COVID year and a half break there, but and there were absolutely days that I would walk into that building and just think like, I don't want to do this today. Yeah. I can't believe that all these people are here. What do they want from me? I'm tired. I don't feel well or whatever. but that's the job that so the clothes go on, them dun 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 dun, and you sort of jump into the energy of what, and not so much that, this time I'm going to do my shot, and all of a sudden I'm energized, but I take it as a responsibility to the person out there who has waited 6 months or 2 years,
especially with Hamilton. I mean, just so much anticipation built into the show to begin with, and
I take that as a responsibility to make sure that it never seems like I am just walking through, because there are definitely times when, my mouth is saying, in the eye of a hurricane there is quiet, but my brain is saying, I think I left the laundry in the dryer. Exactly. You know what I mean? Like, that's happening. And so I try to avoid that as much as possible. Exactly. But I am a human being, and sort of life happens around.
But that's also spontaneity of the live performance, right? You also never know what's going to happen.
Well, and then I come back to, I'm like, wait, no one's looking at me funny. No one seems to have stopped. So I think I said all the words right, you know?
Well, that, as we said before we went on, it's kind of like flipping it around also, that, you have the energy from the people who are in the room, but then, the fact is, a lot of our engineers work on theaters. They work on facilities for public performance, or actually a lot of really high-end performance spaces in New York and across the country. As a performer, as someone who actually uses the space that's engineered, what would you tell the engineers who are working on that they should think about from a performer's perspective? How much does the space affect the performance? How does that help you get that energy out all the time?
I think it's tough to talk about that from the perspective of being in a Broadway show, because the Broadway theaters in New York City are tiny. They're cramped. There's not a lot of space backstage. If you go backstage at Hamilton on Broadway, the area we're sitting in right here is all the space there is. So that's the stage, and that's the wall, and there's not a lot of space.
And it's been like that for a century.
And there's nowhere to build. There's nowhere to change it. And so then you make sure you make do with what, in that sense, you have to just sort of make sure that you do the best you can with the space. So as new spaces are being built and new ideas about what would make it a great place to make art, and so that's all you're thinking about. And my thought is always that the ease of transition from without having to go up steps or down steps to get to a quiet space, to get to a preparation space where there's enough, because that's an important part of what we do, is to be able to find a place to get, if you're not there, if you're having whatever, so to be able to have access to a space to not be so close to the stage, those kinds of things, like that makes it feel comfortable, that makes it feel like that you're not always, because that's the other thing, is like sometimes when you're in the stage or in the business, you kind of want to get away from the action. You want to get away from there, get away from the people, get away into your own space, and those kinds of spaces are super important, where the common spaces feel homey, they feel comfortable, where the dressing spaces feel warm and inviting, and those kinds of things make a huge difference to how we enter the day, and how we enter the show, and those kinds of things are important, I think, for folks that are designing it, not just that it's like cool and sexy and like looks cool, but that it actually has a function to either separate or enhance or the comfort of being a human on the other side of, like we were talking about before.
It's an important use of space. The focus is so much on, of course, the customer coming in, the seating, the everything that goes around the whole facility, but creating a space for the performers to be able to heighten the experience and heighten their performance and do their best on stage.
And there's, for instance, on Broadway right now, the Hamilton, if I would go off stage on the stage right side and I had to enter stage left, I had to go all the way under, down the stairs, under the pit, up the other stair passageway, up to the top. Whereas it would be nice to have, granted, it's an old theater, and newer theaters, if the tour, I think in DC, when they come through, there is space behind. They can go right around and take it. But those little things like that are part of the experience as well.
There's one project, and I forget the name of it, but it's a project on Broadway, and it's an old vaudeville theater, and it was built in the late 19th century. And I think they completely restructured it for that purpose, because they realized that in no way, shape, or form can you actually have a 21st century performance in a 19th century space, and they've just completely renovated it for that purpose. So,
yeah, it does. Yeah. Every time I see even a newish theater out in somewhere else, not in New York City, I'm like, wow, this is nice. Yeah. Even in Chicago, when I was doing the show there was a little more space. It wasn't quite as big as like a new modern theater, but the having that kind of space and that a little bit of breathing room is so important.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears, because tonight you're going to be giving a performance that is also tied into your personal story and the story of your family, especially your daughter Adelaide, who bravely fought severe epilepsy until age of 4, and that kind of shaped, not only the challenges. Of course, your wife wrote a very, very good book on dealing with grief, of course, but then also starting a foundation to deal with this, to kind of just to address this condition. Tell us a little bit more about the foundation, what you want to get across to the audience today, and how we can kind of, individually help to try to combat or deal with or just help to overcome this, especially this condition.
Yeah, when we were finding out that I was going to be Hamilton in Chicago, we were also finding out that my daughter had infantile spasms, which is a terrible form of childhood epilepsy, the worst kind.
Yeah.
And so as we're navigating both of these, life-altering, one, I call it holding onto a rocket in one hand and a parachute in the other hand. So like these two opposing forces. We quickly learned that that there was not a ton known, or not enough known. This is 2016, 2017, about epilepsy and the seizure disorders. And so, a young family going to a doctor thinking that the doctor should be able to say, here's how we fix this.
Yeah.
Here's how we deal with this. That wasn't the case. And so we realized very quickly that there was a lot of work to be done. And I was also standing on a soapbox as big as they come, as Alexander Hamilton in the show in Hamilton. So we decided to start working with an organization called Cure. Right at the time, they were called Citizens United for Research in Epilepsy, and sort of created our own wing of that, the My Shot at Epilepsy sort of focus, to use the platform that we had to help them and raise money and awareness. And that's really all it is. Seizure disorders and epilepsy, 1 in 26 people will be affected by a seizure, and that is so many people. It's more than Alzheimer's. It's more than with the other ALS and but they as neurological diseases, and yet they get not nearly as much funding. So that's what we decided to focus our efforts, because as we were learning, as my daughter was getting older, her condition was getting worse, we were realizing that science was not going to catch her.
Yeah.
And so the best thing we could do was try to help science catch up, so that another family doesn't have to deal with it. And so that's where it was. And our hope is that with enough, yelling to the rooftops and with enough research and with enough money, that it catches up, and there's better treatments, better drugs, and better help. And Hamilton's a lot about legacy, and that is the goal. Is in Adelaide's honor. We lost her just before her first birthday, and for her legacy to sort of try to make our experience not what some new young family has to go through down the road. And and to check out my wife became such an unbelievable advocate and unbelievable champion in the epilepsy community, and we just want more people to know about the struggles that folks with seizure disorders have, and that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that realm. And the biggest thing is money for research. These young, unbelievably talented scientists need some help to get into this field and to go research these brain, the inner workings of the brain that they don't understand. And so that's our hope, is that what we can do, our little part can maybe change one kid's trajectory from what we did. And so Cure Epilepsy is the name of the organization that we work with. They're out of Chicago. They do unbelievable work supporting young scientists, and KellyCervantes.com is my wife's website, and in that world of connecting people to this idea of disease and the needs of that community, she became this champion of grief and folks who are grieving and the connectivity that we all have through that.
And her mother was a therapist?
Her mother was a mental health therapist.
So at least had that backing of understanding, like, how do you deal with this?
Yeah, and the realization is that you deal with whatever it is. I mean, and we started grieving when we found out our daughter was sick.
Yeah.
That is a whole type of grieving. And then as we're changing this whole outlook of what our life was going to be, that's a whole other kind of grieving with that. And then when we lost her, clearly that's going to be its own type of grieving. And the individuality of it and the,
it doesn't end, it just evolves.
Yeah, and we are all connected in that life experience. We will all grieve something at some point. And those kinds of things, that to be able to reach out and help, whether it's in this epilepsy world or my wife helping people who are going through some tough times in their life, never ever will it be worth losing our daughter. You know what I mean? You can take Hamilton back if you want. You can have it all. If we could have a healthy daughter, but that's not how these things work. So our efforts to help other people will be a way to use that as fuel, and that's what we want to do.
And then you've also lent your own creative efforts. You released a song for charity, Till the Calm Comes. All the proceeds go to raising money for that reason.
It's on YouTube. You can go Till the Calm Comes, take a listen. And there's a music video. Some of the Hamilton fam from the Chicago company helped me make this video, and it's anything that ever comes out of that, the YouTube world goes right to Cure and what they do. So it's any little thing that I can do to sort of.
We'll put a link in that in the show notes and have that there, and I'm sure that the audience is going to come away with a lot to think about. Stories like this, it's always that it's success, and then also, I mean, it's amazing how things, there's no singular event. It's always tied to something else. It's either a positive, but the positive comes with a negative. And the negative, positives come tied to that too. And half of life is just trying to balance the two.
Absolutely.
And how you do that really is the story of what you leave. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So, Miguel, thank you again for taking the time. I hope you have a fantastic performance on stage tonight. I know our audience is going to love it, and I really appreciate you coming.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure.
Fantastic. And again, this has been Engineering Influence, a podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies, and we'll see you next time.